Anything that is not absolutely positively mandated by the jail standards, we're going to cut out. If I can find a penny somewhere, I will pick it up and put it back in the budget. I do think we need more deputies. It's a big county. I can't imagine that they're running this place with 80 deputies. These poor guys must be running ragged. But it's up to you guys to decide. So if you say you don't want the tax increase and I'm your sheriff, I will work with the budget I have to do the job that needs to be done. By the way, my name is John Plow.
As a business owner, we have to take every step at a time. The first step you have to do is address your budget. At our factory, every single year, our multi-million-dollar company, we have to address our budget to find out what we need to cut out, what we need to add in, what we need to do. Before we go to those steps about asking the people, because I too believe as well that it needs to go to the people if that's where we have to go. But we need to take one step at a time. And we have to work with what we have. And there are many areas at the Sheriff's Office and in our budget that we can cut, where we can give those deputies the raises, the training, and give them those valuable resources so they can go home to their families. Because that's not happening. They meet the minimum standards. That is not acceptable. They deserve better than that, and you, the people, deserve better than that. You're the voters of Mohave County, you're the residents, and your safety and security is not being put first. We need to take those initial steps before we work on addressing you, the people. And if I'm elected your sheriff, I make you that commitment that I will do that. I will build the budget up from zero, justify where the money's being spent to make sure it's being spent appropriately and redirect it where it needs to go. And then secondly, if that's not possible, then you, the voters, will have that choice.
How many were around in the early 90s when Sheriff Sheehan went to the public looking for the override? Anybody remember that? Yeah, we were in dire straits back then. And the sheriff stepped up and he said, look, we need the money. This is why we need the money. And he said exactly what Joe just mentioned. It's your call. It's coming out of your pockets. Now, if it's going to happen, I do like a sales tax. I don't want to see it on the property tax. I would like a bed and breakfast tax personally. You get the hotels, the visitors that are coming, let's take a lot of it out of that and try and leave our people alone. But the bottom line is this. We're all saying the same thing in a different way. These deputies, yes, they need more money, okay? And then we say, well, we need more deputies. Well, we can't even fill the dang spots we have now. We're 30 people short. Because what happens is we hire a new deputy and he's good to go and he's excited. And over the course of time, he becomes disgruntled because he's not seeing the raises, he's not being treated properly, he's kept in unsafe conditions, and he's asked to do all this, and spill his water. He's asked to do all of this with no respect from his own leaders. Okay, we need to fix it, and we're going to fix it. Thank you.
Do we need to get someone in to help us with that? Are you?
That didn't go on my lap.
Okay.
I have a question. I would like your opinion on gun-free zones.
The question is about gun-free zones. Doug, I think it's back to you again.
Do you want some more water?
No, I honestly don't. I really don't. What was the question?
Gun-free zones.
Illegal gun-free zones, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, should we have gun-free zones? Do we have some gun-free zones already? I mean,
I understand it.
private businesses.
It's coming at me in different directions I couldn't understand. Yeah, there should be certain gun-free zones, okay? There are certain places, especially in a private business, and they should have the authority to say, I don't want you coming in with your gun. That's their right, okay? You walk into a bank, I don't know if I feel overly comfortable walking into a bank when there's people in there carrying weapons. Now, I support their right to do so, but it does, as the old cop in me, makes me be a little more attentive. Okay, so there are specific areas. Do we want guns in bars? Probably not a real good idea. So if there were specific gun-free zones, I wouldn't oppose it as long as it did not impede on your personal rights and we didn't take it to the wrong level. Thank you.
You have the right as a private business owner if you choose to have a gun-free zone. Now, if we're going to go into the discussion of public areas, if I was a criminal, that's the first place I would go to rob somebody. Because the only people that would listen to that would be somebody who was a law-abiding citizen. So, in reference to public areas, absolutely not. But you have the right as a business owner. It's your right how you want to run your property, your business, and conduct your facility to do so how you see fit. But not public areas. Absolutely not.
And no deputies would go there, right?
I'm sorry, what, Steve?
No deputies would want to patronize and the public wouldn't want to.
Right, that's why I said, if you were a criminal, that's the first place you were going to go is, hey, let's go to the gun-free zone, let's rob everybody. I mean, it's not effective.
This is John Plow again. Aurora, Colorado, a guy with pink hair and an AR-15 and a shotgun went into a theater with a big sign outside that said gun-free zone. And he shot the place up, and he killed a bunch of people. And by the way, he's still alive, I believe. We had a school in Newtown, another gun-free zone. Locked up as tight as a jail this place was. Guy kicks in the window, walks through with his gun, shoots the place up, kills a bunch of kids. If you have a gun-free zone, what you are doing is putting a big target out there for every wacko to come in there and shoot the place up. If you own a business and you're afraid of guns and you want to be a target, more power to you. I don't believe the government has the authority, with the exception of their own buildings, to have gun-free zones. And you're not going to have to worry about me doing any gun-free zones as your sheriff, that's for sure.
I believe that business owners, as the others have said, have the right to decide whether they want guns in their businesses or not. I've been asked this question before about schools. Elementary, junior high, high school, I believe, should be free of guns, except for the officers who are involved as school resource officers, teaching dare, whatever is there. Because if somebody comes into that school, the cops are going to get there as fast as they can. The first one on the scene is going to go in and start shooting anybody with a gun. If a teacher pulls a gun out of a desk to try to stop something that's going on in that school, I can almost guarantee you if a cop comes through that door and sees an adult with a gun, he's going to shoot him. There's going to be no questions asked. So in elementary, junior high, and high school, I'm not in favor of guns being in those, except for the police officers who are assigned to those schools. College is a different thing. You're 18 years old. You can go in the military, and I was in college. I know that maybe I wasn't the most responsible person in the world, but I knew what my rights were. I also knew what my responsibilities were. And it's a different kind of environment than the elementary, junior high, and high schools. So if they want to have guns in colleges, that's up to them. If they can pass the background that is required of them, if they pass training, and if they want to carry a gun in that school. So that's where I stand on.
Again, I'm the last one on the end. There's nothing I can say here that we haven't already said. I do support a business owner's right to do what he wants in his own business, but in public, the Second Amendment's the Second Amendment. You shouldn't have a gun-free zone unless you want to be a target. Now, Joe and I differ one little bit in the schools. In my former department, every school, we had a plan, and in that plan contained the teachers and the staff members that had a weapon. We taught them, and we taught the school our plan. So if we had an active shooter, we know what teacher, what administrator, they're the ones charged with grabbing the kids, shelter in place in that room, locking it down, and we know that we have a weapon in that classroom. And we had a signal, and I'm not going to tell you what the signal was, but we had a signal system. So if that teacher had an issue and that gun was compromised or that teacher was compromised, we knew that that room, whether the door was closed or not, if that signal was given, that a law enforcement officer would go in there. And this only occurs with extensive training, because I do agree with Joe. If you get an outside officer to a location and he is unfamiliar with that and it's an active shooter, unfortunately some officers may shoot the first guy with a gun. But if you work in that area, you live in that area, you're assigned to that area, and you have an active shooter plan in place with each school, that will eliminate that problem. I do believe teachers should have guns in school. Trained, educated, well secured on their person, not visible to the students, but has the ability to act in an active shooter scenario along with that officer in there.
Okay, we have another question. This gentleman right next to you, Steve.
I won't take too much time. Steve thinks a quarter cent is sufficient. I disagree. I think we need a penny. These policemen need lots of ammunition. You have to upgrade plant and place equipment. You got to have cryptology. There's a whole range of stuff that has to go in this effort. So I have some very creative ideas how to get the bread. So we will talk about that later.
Did you have a question? Here's another question. Here's a question since I have it. You said we're down 30%. How many would be ideal for Mohave County for sheriffs? How many deputies do we need?
Well, I assume we need 30% more.
We are down 30%. Ideally, we would like to regain those numbers, but in reality, in my time with the sheriff's office, I started in 1989, the amount of sworn deputies has not increased. Okay, we're thin. We've always been thin. Credit goes to the men and women serving because they do make it work. And every time we lose another body, they work a little harder to make it work, and it becomes the norm. We need to get up. We need to increase with the population increase. 1989, we had less than 100,000 residents total in Mohave County. So we've doubled the residents of Mohave County since that point, and we've added a whopping 0 deputies to our staff. In fact, to boot, we can't even keep the ones that we do have because we don't pay them enough and we don't treat them properly. So we got a real problem, okay? But it's fixable. It's very fixable. I didn't really get to think about the quarter-cent sales tax. I hadn't heard it till tonight. The more I think on it, I think it is needed. Now, I want the voters to have the say. I think that's how it's supposed to be. But what a great way, and I just want to reiterate this, and I know my time's up, what a great way to bring in the revenue that's needed without that direct impact on you. Let's let others help out. Visitors coming through, let's let them help as well. Thank you.
I agree. We need to take the steps necessary. And once again, when we're dealing with going over the budget and everything along that line, those are the steps that we have to take. We need to boost the morale of the sheriff's office. We need to get the people the income and the revenue that they need.
Well, the question
How
from
many
Steve
how many
Robbins.
sheriff deputies? We have 82. And here's the point. There's 135 in Yavapai County, which is the same geographic area south of the river and the same population. 135 in Yavapai.
Well, and to answer that specifically, every single deputy and body we have on the street counts. So we have to start with one, but we have to give them a reason to stay. So that's why I keep going back to the budget. We have to give the people we already have the reason to stay. We need that for the officers. We need them to have higher pay, better training, resources, and the experience to keep them here in Mohave County instead of going to other agencies. They typically stay for 2-3 years, then they realize they have other opportunities, areas of advancement and training where they can take their leadership skills because they are recognized. We can open up so many extra areas at the sheriff's office, specialty units, give them the incentive, the reason to stay. We used to do warrant sweeps. I remember I helped participate in the orchestration of doing some warrant sweeps. Just little things like that. Number one, just being there for the deputies and letting them realize that they're number one.
How many do we need?
We need 30% more, so, you
How
know,
many is that?
30% more. About 130. 130 is about 30% more off the top of my head. It would be about 125, between 125 and 130. So when you're increasing it that much, and the reason why I didn't address that answer right away is because Doug Schuster had already addressed that, but that's my answer.
This is John Plow again. The federal standard for the number of police people that you would have in a given population is between, it's one deputy or policeman for every 1,000 or 1,500 residents. That's kind of a guideline. we're not meeting that in Mohave County. But it's also a function of crime. Criminals are like cockroaches, and when you shine a light on them, they scurry and hide. So if you put your efforts where the actual criminals are, where all these tweakers who are causing these 13,000 crimes that he talks about, which is the vast majority of problems we have in this county, tweakers breaking into your stuff and stealing it. If we shine the light of the Mohave County Sheriff's Department in those areas, we might be able to get these crime numbers down by focusing on the areas where the crime actually is. So even though everyone says we need more deputies, and I would agree with that, more deputies on the street means more criminals are going to be scared, we might be able to focus the budget and get the people in the area where the crimes are to get the crime levels down.
There's several ways to go about needing more deputies. I've heard Sheriff McCabe say that Yavapai County is 8,500 square miles compared to our 13,000, and they have 135 deputies and we have 86. That is true. However, what are their calls for service? How many crime statistics? It's not as simple as just saying, well, they have that, we want this. It's not that simple. And quite honestly, there's no way in hell we can't keep the 30% that Doug is talking about over. We can't keep them here if we don't give the current deputies a raise, so you're never going to hire 30%. So what makes us think we're going to go out and hire 135 people? It isn't going to happen. So budgetary constraints would keep us from doing that 135. I propose we look at calls for service, where the crimes are committed, look at assignments, and try to maybe, if we had the same numbers, is go to the board and ask for backfill of the officers. Because what happens is when an officer retires, it's 1 year before we hire, train, and get him on the street, and that's just a minimum standard. So what a lot of agencies have done is gone to a backfill where you know you got a guy retiring, let's hire somebody and get him in the training and get him going so that as soon as this guy retires, we can replace him without having to wait a year to get it done.
Again, last one on the totem pole here, but here's the difference. Now, Mr. Schuster and many of the others, they're basing these numbers off UCR codes, which are Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics, that when the department arrests a criminal, these stats are reported up to the FBI, and they keep a statistical database on everything. Now, experience shows when you increase the number of deputies, the number of crimes goes up. No, it's not the deputies committing the crimes. The more deputies on the street, the more crimes are actually discovered and solved. Because right now, what's not reported is the unreported number of crimes. Now, these guys in here will tell you that work the street, they probably run across 4 or 5 crimes they realize is a crime. If you don't have a complainant in this type of environment, you're too busy to do free-handed investigation and go find this out. Now, once that number goes up, that will give you a true analytical number process that will give you the true number of deputies you need. But again, the more deputies, the more crime you're going to find. So I don't have a true number, but what I do know is the process in which to find that number. In the meantime, as Joe said, you reallocate resources and do what's called a wolf pack. I don't know if they're already doing that now, but you move resources to the area that the crime is occurring in, you stomp it out, and you move to the next area. It's a strategic risk with this number of deputies, but I don't want to send a deputy out alone in an area of the county to patrol that county area by himself. I'd rather send 5 out there, take out all the criminals, move to the next area. Yes, Steve, I got it. These questions deserve more than that.
Thank you very much. And you know, that figure of 30% is really interesting to me, because that's just about the turnover rate we have at Kingman Unified School District every year. So all this that you're talking about, if you don't mind a little shameless plug about teachers here, and I'm not a teacher, I'm just on the school board, but all that stuff about sheriff's deputies and underpaid and turnover and, you know, good people that move on because they get a better deal somewhere else, that goes for teachers too. I just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. Yeah, well, and you know, funding is a big issue, as we know. All right, we do have another question. I'll take a couple more questions, but I really would like to give these good people at least a minute or so to wrap up. I think 2 minutes is absolutely appropriate. They're wonderful candidates. They've spoken really well tonight. So 2 more questions. Okay, in the back.
I'm Amanda Kaufman.
Need a
Mike. I try to talk really loud.
No,
They won't
you
hear
can't hear me
me.
out there.
Okay. Amanda Kaufman. I have a question, and I might look at it so I don't say it wrong. But would you guys, as our sheriff, would each of you, because this is important to me, would you support an organized effort for our county to take our lands back from the federal government? We've been talking about revenue, and that is a big revenue source.
Good question. Let's start with you.
I would support that effort. Now, this question has been raised before, and I'm surrounded by BLM land, and I use BLM land all the time. Should the government own that much private land? You know, Arizona, we're not in that bad a shape here. We're really not if you look at some of the other states. Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota, the government owns most of that state. That is not what the founding fathers intended. So yes, I would support a legal initiative to remove lands from federal control to state control. It can still remain a public park, it can still remain under the auspices of government, but it should be under the auspices of state and not federal government. Because for those of you who don't know, we have about 1.5 million tourists a year that drive through Kingman. That revenue goes to the federal government a lot of times because they're using federal lands. That land was here before the federal government, and it should remain part of the state. And I would support that initiative. If we had something that we could go back to the government and say, hey, here's a legal precedent to remove this from under the government auspices of the federal government to state, I would definitely support it and do everything I can to achieve that goal.
I agree, I support the initiative. However, again, it's not as simple as I support or I don't support it. I read just an article the other day in Utah. There's 66% of Utah is federal land. If the state were to take that over at one point, we'll just take it all back over, it'd cost them $111 million a year and they'd be bankrupt. It would need to be taken back gradually, because they took it from the state gradually, take it back gradually to where the state could afford it. You may also not know that federal lands, they do pay, it's called payment in lieu of taxes, because those lands are not on the tax roll. So the federal government pays the county a certain amount of money. And I'm not saying it's the right amount of money, I'm not saying any of that, I just, in case you weren't aware, there is money that comes from the federal government back. So, to just go out and take back all of our federal lands, I don't think that's going to happen. Would I support the initiative? Yes, I support it. But there are caveats, and it's not that simple of an answer.
I just want everyone to know, this is John Plow speaking again, and I did not plant Amanda in the audience. This question speaks exactly to why I'm running. Constitutionally, the federal government cannot own any land that is outside of Washington, D.C., or is not directly beneath a building for the military or a dockyard. And so the question of whether or not the BLM has any right owning any land at all, or whether or not it's financially feasible for Arizona to take the land back, is not the point. Even if it was not financially feasible for Arizona to take the land back, the federal government does not legally own it. That's very important you understand what is wrong with this country. Our federal government is completely out of control, and we have allowed it to happen. We're all guilty for this. The best thing we can do with this BLM land is to just take it back. To say, thank you for servicing it, load up your BLM trucks, and get the hell out.
Agreed. As a constitutionalist, it's our responsibility to maintain all of our lands, and all the lands in Mohave County belong in essence, to the sheriff's office. Another issue that we are facing is that we keep getting asked, would you be willing to deputize? Absolutely not. will not do any deputization of federal agents. We need to reclaim our land and what's ours under the Constitution. And as a constitutionalist, I will do that.
Anybody else have to use the restroom? Holy, I've drank so much coffee today. It's all been said. I don't want to rehash. No, absolutely not would be my answer. I don't like big government. I'm sick of big government. All right, let's worry about dealing with Mohave County. One thing, and I didn't catch your name, sir. What was it?
It's John Plow.
John Plow. One thing you said is correct. We all complain. Everyone's complaining about it. I stopped over and saw my father today. He was griping up a storm, but we're doing nothing about it, okay? So I guess what I'm saying is if we don't start walking the walk instead of talking the talk, nothing is going to change.
All happens the next vote.
There you go. All happens the next vote. So the cool thing is you're all here. That's the cool thing. You got to start somewhere, and if you don't get involved, it's going to be another 4 years of who knows what, okay? So thank you for coming out tonight. I think, is that the last question? Oh, great, cool.
Thank you. Gary Hill, retired Navy. My background is efficiency in the federal government and the private industry. Richard, we had the sheriff here last year. I asked him outside if I could help you. He wasn't interested. What type of attitude will you have with a guy like me where you can share coffee or a donut or have lunch and I can give you some valuable information to solve some of the problems? I was just astounded at his reaction. By the way, concerning the food of our prisoners, at our base in Italy in 1985, we had 2 terrorists. And being nice Americans, we have to give them a lot of good food and cable TV. That's one of our problems with being nice people. Thank you very much.
Okay, these guys are getting a little tired up here, so. Okay, I know. Was there a question?
Yeah, there's a question. When you talk to somebody like me,
well, I beg your pardon.
Well, there's a question right now. He has a question.
Okay, I have the question. The question was, how do the candidates feel about drawing on the experience of many citizens that can bring a positive change to the Sheriff's Department? I can only speak for myself. I recognize the value of it. I think the Sheriff's Office or the police departments by themselves, they're going to chase their tail to a certain degree. It takes involvement, and it takes good people with solid backgrounds and solid understanding of what we're all trying to accomplish as a team to make it happen. So specifically, yeah, I want to sit down with you and have a cup of coffee. And if somebody else is a 35-year-old or 35-year retired law enforcement officer or anything with the experience, I want to talk to them too. Because you never know when you're going to get that one tidbit that you just weren't thinking about and you say, holy cow, just fix the budget talking to a guy that's been retired for 20 years. This is what they did and it worked. So if any of you want to talk to old Doug Schuster over a cup of coffee, not with water, give me a call. We'll talk about it, okay? Thank you, folks.
My question is, my husband...
Wait a minute, we got
answer. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what the position of the Mohave County Sheriff is. It's about you and making your opinion count, because it does. It's your choice who you vote in as your sheriff, and your sheriff needs to be there for you. From the point I started campaigning and since I became a public servant and community servant to Mohave County, I've been connecting all over. I've gone statewide, local. For an example, I met with Mayor Mark Nex in Lake Havasu City. He was the first elected official to sign my petition in support of me for my run to be your next Mohave County Sheriff. It's important to connect, gain the ideas of what is going on, not in just your community, but the areas that need to be fixed, and what ideas they have, what issues they see for the Sheriff's Office. And your opinion is just as important. And I would love to have a cup of coffee with you.
Your name is John Plow.
That's right. Now that you guys know who I am, I'll remind you. My name's John Plow.
You're welcome.
The comment that you made and the question you asked addresses what I was going to say about having